Well, good morning again. And for those of you online, welcome to Cleveland in some sense, and welcome to the Benjamin Rose and University Center for Aging and Health and Judson Retirement Community. And this is our reactor panel. And I can tell you, having lunch with them yesterday, and a couple of them have already asked questions, they are reactors. And I'm not going to be the moderator. I'm not going to stand behind the podium. I'm going to be the immoderator, which for those of you that know, immoderation is my middle word. So these folks have kindly volunteered and participated and been enthusiastic about the project. You heard Dick's comment in his question. And I actually am also what we like to not refer to ourselves as end users. So when the robot has something to do, I'm the first one that says, I'm the oldest. I get to play with the robot.
Peter, hold the microphone higher up. You're covering the antenna.
Okay, thank you.
Move your hand up.
What's sorry?
There needs to be a course that says about
You're holding the antenna.
Oh, I'm holding the antenna. You need to hold it like a rock star. You know, this is the first time I've used a microphone in my career, so you can excuse me for being not practiced at it. And as somebody wearing technology to improve my hearing, you'd think I'd be more sensitive. So we're very fortunate to have 4 people who participated in the project. And I'm not going to say very much other than to say welcome, thank you. And why don't you introduce yourself? At lunch we agreed probably it would be useful for you to know who these folks are and a little bit about their background with technology, because as the theme has already been in this meeting, as we get older, people are different, and as you get older, you get more different. So, I won't explain that one. Okay, so let's just start with Arthur. Would you just say a little bit about who you are and your engagement with technology?
Sure. I'm Arthur Glidden. I'm a retired engineer, although engineering is more a condition than a vocation, but we don't ever get over it, do we? But I have been involved with technology in one way or another throughout my whole working life. I started repairing electronic navigation equipment for the Air Force in the 1970s and worked for decades in manufacturing facilities that used various levels of automation. And I have some in my ear right now. I have digital signal processing devices that are sophisticated electronic chips that can do a lot more than just amplify sound. So I'm very familiar with technology. During the break, I was on my cell phone checking on the shipping out on Lake Erie. I keep track of what the boats are doing and where they are. So,
cool hobby.
He's a nerd of the first order. But he's my nerd. I'm Nancy Glidden. I'm a fairly new resident at Judson Park and very happy we landed there. My experience with technology, I feel as though I really was dropped in the deep end when I became the director of an information referral and crisis line in Dayton, Ohio. We survived using 3 forms of technology, which really just made it possible for us to do our job. We were a 24-hour service, so we had to have a lot of reliability. We needed state-of-the-art telephone, and we had that. It was marvelous. We also had an enormous database of all the human services in 3 counties, and we had to make sure that that was accurate. So we relied on a 3rd technology, which was the taxonomy of human services. It's only about that thick. We used that as sort of the programming language for our database, so we knew what we were dealing with. We also used it to assess our callers' needs so that we could make sure we had an accurate match between what they were expressing as their need and what services were available to them where they lived. So that was my experience with technology, and the biggest challenge we had was being able to afford it.
Richard.
Yes, I'm Richard Cohen, and I'm a retired dentist. The technology in dentistry has changed a great deal. In 1967, it was the beginning of implant dentistry, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the first in Cleveland, Ohio, to be able to restore an implant that had been implanted in the patient's mouth, and it happened to be my patient. But interestingly enough, I think probably the most fortunate technological advance in dentistry was a piece of string. Do you know what that was or is? Dental floss. That was also introduced by a dentist in where? Illinois, who went around the country saying how important it was to use dental floss. So that's my experience with technology.
In 1981, I became a licensed real estate agent. I've been a realtor, and the change was, at that time, in order to get an acceptance of an offer, you had to go personally deliver it and get it signed, which I had to do at 2 o'clock in the morning. And now everything is by computer. You can sign a listing, you can sign a contract for sale, no matter where you are in the world, by email. So that's the difference. However, when I have a problem with my computer or my cell phone, I call my daughter in Chicago, and she takes control of my phone or my computer and helps me.
And I'm going to just say that I'm a geriatric neurologist, but I've been a geek for a while, long enough that the junk pile in my office that I call a museum of digital equipment is what my wife calls a junk pile. But I have a smart home too, so I've been very much interested in this topic for a long time. So as I mentioned, all these folks have been involved in this project in one way or another. So we thought we'd do one more round before we start interacting with each other and with you around what their experience with RUI was. And that will be a lead into, and you've heard from a couple of them already, what they'd like to see for the future. Because we want to connect. We want to end this meeting with my friend Stormy Schweitzer thinking about the future of this technology as well, but we need your input for the future. So who feels inspired to go first? We'll do popcorn this time. Or the same order. It's up to you. Which order would you like to do?
I'll go ahead. My experience with Rui, visiting our apartment for about an hour several weeks ago, was a very un-engineering experience. I was amazed at how comfortable I felt with this device. One of the pieces of information that the person introducing it gave Rui was that I was a woodworker. And we engaged in a conversation, but I thought we were going to build something because she was really interested in what kind of lumber we were going to use and what the design was going to be, and I forgot it was a machine. So I'm persuaded that people can learn to be comfortable with and benefit from an experience like this.
Keep going.
Yeah.
I think I was ground zero for the visits. I'm getting nods from Josh and Phil. And so I got to experience a lot of glitches like not going to the charging station and things like that. But she told me a nice story based on knowing that we have a dog that I'm very fond of and that we visit the other residents in the community. And so she told me a nice story with those pieces of information that had been given to her. It was lovely. But I was very self-conscious, so I really didn't engage with this person, this thing. It's always a woman, frankly. She's pink. I think all of us say that anyway. I woke up the other day saying I could never have Rui in my apartment. Based on that experience, it just struck me. I just couldn't relate to this. I didn't feel any empathy. And as I get older, I'm going to really need to feel empathy with the caregivers that I'll have. And then we talked about it yesterday at lunch. I was afraid to confess that, but I got a lot of nods and felt sort of supported by all of the folks that we had been talking with. And then I realized that AI is going to help me feel some empathy with this robot going forward. So I'm still enthusiastic about what the potential is, and I'm eager to stay involved in the development.
So I have to agree with Arthur that I almost fell in love with Rui. But then I realized that Trudy was next to me, and I couldn't say that. So, again, I'm 93 years old, so there's no way that Rui is going to be part of my life. I won't last that long. But I look forward to seeing the advancement, the technological advancements that will improve Rui's abilities to communicate with people, to help my sons, grandsons, great-grandchildren. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
I was fascinated with Rui in that I told her a story, and then she responded appropriately to what I had said. The thing that bothers me is her bulk. I thought it was too big, and I would rather see something smaller, but I think it's very exciting, and I too am very happy to be part of the project.
Well, I think you just volunteered for our next study, whatever that is. Thank you very much. So let's talk about this issue of embodiment. Can I use that word? It is ironic. We have an engineer and a dentist who happen to be male, who are falling in love with the robot. And although and you used the word empathy, do you? Did the two of you who didn't fall in love right away feel that you were able to relate to the robot in a way that could grow into some kind of relationship beyond just a box on wheels?
Go ahead.
No.
I will say that this robot is designed it has lots of cameras and radar to watch people walk and help them with falls, as you heard. The only problem with the design, as you also heard, is this robot tends to fall flat on its face. So this is the ultimate irony.
Look who's falling.
Sorry?
I said, look who's falling.
Yes, exactly. But the issue of the color. At lunch yesterday, you said it's pink. And I said it's flesh because I wanted to allow the opportunity for a different gender. And I had actually suggested a line of clothing for Rui so people could choose for themselves. But do you think it's necessary to have a robot, or do you think the technology that you have already, whether it's Alexa or a cell phone, is going to be serve your needs?
Well, when we were talking about the color, my suggestion was that Rui come in black, brown, yellow, all the colors of different races so people could identify. However, as we were speaking this morning, I decided Rui is too big and too cumbersome, and I'd rather see a smaller gadget that somebody could either hold or wear. That I think the smartphone, the smart watches can determine if you have fallen. So I think the technology will be there in the future. And my objection would be the size that it is now. The other question that came up was, who's going to pay for it and how? Is it going to be insurance? Is the senior residents, wherever it may be, going to be paying for it? Will the government pay for it? That's a big question.
You know, I almost feel like apologizing because it was a joke yesterday to follow a pink to flesh, but you point out human flesh is multicolored, and the idea that AI is contributing to a greater digital divide rather than to bringing us together as human beings, I think is a great tension. Do you have questions for each other? Actually, I said we'd have that opportunity before we open it up a bit. No? What would you like to, let's just ask one last question that takes us back into the future and then open it up for other questions. Obviously, I have more if we need to go that way, but what would you like us to do in this next study that you volunteered for?
You look surprised.
What are the essential, take it at a design level, take it at a, and two of you made comments and asked questions, so I know we've heard from some of your concerns as well as hopes for the future.
Well, I like the novelty of the robot. Judy disagrees, that's not unusual. She wants something smaller. I like Rui, in that she is something that I can relate to on a more or less human level. And so again, it's the novelty of the individual with whom I had a wonderful communication, wonderful story that I could share with her, and she literally shared with me.
Well, I agree with Dr. Cohen. I like the heft of the robot, and I like the face. We hadn't been able to see the face before having the visit, and the face is really expressive. And I need a device with a face.
I think the thing I was most disappointed with when that first apartment visit was just the mechanical awkwardness of the device, not being able to find its way to the charging station. We had an interesting experience where Rui was watching me walk back and forth in the apartment to get a gauge of gait, and our little dog went by, and our little dog was enough to block the sensors that detect motion. So there are a lot of room for improvement, and Phil has talked about that. I mean, they're well aware that there are rough edges to be smoothed, but I'm still very enthusiastic.
Better engineering. I will say that the company is ready to do some upgrades on the robot, but we didn't do those, so everybody in the first wave got the experience with the same robot, just to keep the conditions constant across the different visits scientifically. Anybody else with comments about the future?
The only concern which I expressed earlier was that people were concerned about privacy and AI interference. If, for example, we were talking about bank accounts or any other information that you might share with Rui that would be considered confidential that somebody else might be able to get hold of.
And you know, that bridges to the question. When the person asked the question from the audience in the first panel about where Rui gets her information and what shows up on the screen, to your point, is it a little strange? Would it be a little strange if Arthur's face lit up and showed you an image? I mean, that's what happens with Rui. She goes from an anthropomorphized face to that televised program about the Browns. But the reason I mentioned that, and it gets us into ethical issues again, is I don't know where our team got that video from. That may be a copyrighted video as far as we know. And in fact, I'm personally suing as part of a Anthropic with a bunch of other people, the company that makes the AI Claude, because they took material from our book, 2 books, and used it without our permission. So I think the intellectual property of where Rui gets film clippages or whatever is really also an ethical issue that we haven't addressed yet.
We didn't see that about Rui.
So, okay, I said we'd go one more round about thinking about the future. Perhaps this is a good time to open it up for questions from the audience. And you know, let's make this inclusive. And you know, Phil and Josh and Cindy and Susan who are here might be prompted to ask some questions of the panel as well. So let's just keep it going.
Who was?
Go ahead, let's go over in person and we'll go online.
Who was in? Sorry, I didn't see.
I heard an I'll go.
I saw it.
No.
Great presentation so far, and thank you for your honesty about your feelings about Rui. One of the things that I've been attending a lot of AI presentations recently because of everything that's going on. But one of the things that they cautioned us about in using AI for, say, papers or for doing other things is to not give it personal information such as your bank account numbers or because of the not knowing where all that information is filtered to. So were there any instructions as far as before Rui interviewed people as to what to not say to Rui to keep your information safe? Because that's one of the first things they tell us in AI usage.
The thing that I find a problem with, I agree with you, however, if somebody has a form of dementia, they may not remember that that's what they should not do, and they may become trusting of this robot and give information, either personal information or financial information, whatever it is, that should not be shared. And I don't know how you protect against that.
And the other thing, I had 2-part. The other thing is, I like the part about sharing the memories and keeping all that together. And having worked in hospice, we used to do something called legacy videos, where you save all that information and then be able to package it and give it to your family when you're no longer able to remember it or no longer here to give it to them. And so was some thought about being able to collect that information as a gift to the people who are using Rui, as to be able to share with family after you were gone.
I think that's a very good point. And later on in the day, we'll be learning about music therapy and storytelling and a variety of other approaches, which I think could be potentially incorporated into Rui. If Rui could play music or show videos, do you think that would be a function that you would like it to engage in?
I'd like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And our personal experience with aging parents is music is one of those last connections that is effective and brings comfort to the person aging and the support people around them. So music especially would have great value, I think.
So, more questions in the back there? Online, Kylie, at all? Yeah, I did prime your project for you, so.
Yes, we were just saying how we're going to speak later about visual reminiscence and images, but we said Rui could probably implement our intervention for us, which would be great. But my question for the residents and the participants that used Rui is, did you notice any hallucinations or inaccuracies, things that maybe Rui didn't pick up that you said correctly or anything like that? Because we know with new technologies that happens a lot.
I did not.
Nor did I, though.
No, I was surprised and pleased by how well-informed Rui was, and it seemed that Rui was quite capable of staying in the here and now.
Could I answer that for a sec? The thing that drives me crazy about Rui right now is, and see, we controlled for it because they each made a visit on their own with Rui. Even though they're couples, they made a visit on their own with Rui. Because when Josh and I first turned it on and we were talking to it, we learned very quickly that it can't tell if Josh is talking or if Phil is talking, right? And I thought, well, our voices really aren't that similar, but we're two men, so maybe. It wouldn't matter. It could be a young child, it could be a woman, it could be anything, and it's not recognizing the shift in voice, like voice recognition, number one. And then there was also, you talk about, to me, a glitch. There was latency in its response. So it would really wait till you were done talking. And then initially it was, it seemed like a minute. It probably wasn't, but it was unnatural. So we told the technologist to speed that up. And then I probably talk slower than a lot of people. So like I take a breath and it was jumping in. And once it jumps in, you can't stop it. You can't say like, hold on, Rui, and it'll stop. It keeps going. So we had to slow it back down a little bit. But then there's a latency and it's not recognizing differences in our voices. To this day, the last time I talked to it, I was at Hopkins. It was on a Zoom call. It was calling me Peter because it's used to Peter Whitehouse.
Just to add, I think what's important for the future is that there is a component that the company calls personical, which is the personalization part. So the process by which the robot learns about you and your interests, I think, is important. On the other hand, I had limited time to tell it about my full range of hobbies, so I talked about photography. So every time I talked to Rui, she was always asking and interested. I said interested. Maybe she's interested in that hobby. And when I said we won an award for our photography in the intergenerational school, she was full of praise and everything else. When I started talking to Rui about my plans for the next phase of my career, she was a little less helpful. Dr. Mortimer, Professor Mortimer.
I'm curious about, I think, this program in itself, Paul and Josh. It sounds like you have an opportunity to feed back to this company information of changes you would like to see. I wonder if I might inquire, what have you learned so far this morning in the sense of what you would feed back to them based on what we've said this morning? I mean, I've thought a couple of things, but I wonder what you have thought, since you're the vehicle to communicate with them.
Sure, I'm happy to help answer that question. I'm sorry, I don't have a microphone, but I do have a booming voice. Oh, very good, very good. No worries. Thank you very much. That's a great question. You know, I think that what we learn every time we bring together potential end users is that the conversation has to continue, that this is a reciprocating process back and forth, because it's very easy for us to provide insights like those that Phil presented today, some of our early insights from focus group discussions around autonomy and privacy. But ultimately, those changes, once embodied in the next generation of RUI, have to be brought back for further consideration, for future visits to examine, have these issues been addressed, or is this tweak that we've made not quite the intent of what was presented during the focus group discussion? So it's so important. We all see technologies that emerge into the marketplace, and we get a chance to play with them, and we think, what were they thinking when they did this? And that is exactly the scenario we want to avoid, not just because technology should be better designed, but given the audience and the population in healthcare that we are trying to target, it has to be very, very, very well clearly defined. And that's that process of continuing dialogue that we'll have with residents at Judson and other communities. That notion of exploring beyond the boundaries of just the population at Judson is a wonderful suggestion. So these are all avenues that we will consider going forward.
And I think it's important to emphasize, as Josh did and Phil, this is not our robot. We didn't design this robot. This robot literally rolled into our lives somewhat unexpectedly. There's a long history of work on caregiver, companion, assistant robots. So I wanted to bring this back to embodiment, because the first caregiver robot I had was in 2003, which was the Sony Aibo dog robot. Does anybody remember that one? It looked ugly. It had 250 megabytes of memory. It was really, no offense to any dogs, of course, knowing, stupid. And the Japanese got smart. The next robot that took over the world was a baby harp seal. It was fuzzy with big eyelashes and big eyes, a baby, as all babies are. And that people could hug and hold. And it was partly the hug and holding that was an important part of its success. And you can go on Amazon and buy a robot dog that is fuzzy. And my father-in-law had it during his journey with cognitive challenges. But I want to get and recognize another colleague that may be online. So what do you think about hugging robots? The Japanese have tried to develop robots that can move people. They're Kawasaki, the same people that made my motorcycle. And they're heavy, and they're huge, and they're cumbersome, and they look frightening. And there's a lot of back problems in caregivers. I don't know if you have that at Judson or Benjamin Rose, but they weren't used because they were too complicated, and the attendants, the personal aides in the nursing home wanted to touch people. They didn't want to have a robot take over those responsibilities, even though it injured them. So online is Alexis Block, if she's able to be with us, because she had a delivery date, a real one, and so she's contributing to the future perhaps now as we speak. She's developing robots you can hug in Cleveland and send a hug to Tokyo. So what do you think about touch and robots? It's an important part of embodiment for us.
Well, I'm not so sure that Judy would be thrilled with the idea of my hugging a robot. I'll let her.
I'm not sure that a robot could respond to a hug that I would want or give. I'd have to think about it.
I'm not a touch person.
I am, but I'd be very careful.
Arthur, you're an engineer. We don't have to ask you whether you're a touch person.
Go ahead.
Actually, real life experience with aging family members, a touch of the hand often seems to be a very effective way to communicate. I'm still here. We care about you. We're not going to let go. I don't know if that can be embodied by a robotic device or not, but I think that is at least as powerful as a hug.
I agree with you. I think very often if someone is upset, but just putting a warm human hand on that person can calm them down without even saying a word. So I'm not sure the robot could do that.
I was handed the microphone, Peter, if you don't mind. For the touch idea, just across the street, there is a community working on touch, and their focus is on amputees. And they have created a touch that a person in California can sense by the amputee sending the information there and back and forth. So touch is coming down the pike. And I think it's probably worthwhile to think about it.
All right, we have 5 minutes, so I think maybe we'll close out with this question, which is one that we talked about a little bit at lunch. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a spin on this question from one of our online participants who wrote, addressing these challenges requires synergy between health, AI, psychology, and human-robot interactions. What is your advice for technical researchers like computer scientists, robotics, which I think we already addressed, Dr. Block? Hello, Dr. Block. And so in finding the right partners, which is a question and funding opportunities, so I think if anybody has ideas, we're open to that. But I also want to ask this panel in particular, what do you want to tell those computer scientists, those robotic researchers, to help better design programs to support aging with robotics?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
I think one of the things that has impressed me most about this experience with Phil and company is that their focus is on learning about the end users. And that is what I would recommend to anyone in a career or beginning a career in this field is know your audience, know your users. That's powerful. A lot of the technology is there already or readily available. Learn about people.
I would add to that. We are involved with Cowell Sage. I don't know if any of you are aware of that, but medical students come and talk with us. And the first thing I said to the two that visited V was, be sure you treat a patient as a person and not a disease. So I would pass that on to the researchers.
Can I just add one thing? Because we're here at a place that likes to rethink aging. You may have seen that on the sign on the way in. I think we also need to think about universal design, thinking about designing how this robot interacts not only with older people, but everybody, not only the staff, but also youth. So I think this technology is one that could bring generations together, and we know they're struggling with some of the same issues, loneliness and like. So I'd like the engineers to think about the wide, not just older people, but how the robot will help older people relate to others as well. So thank you all. That was our last question. A good question.